Hello again, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome first time to the channel. I have a new commentary topic that I would like to discuss. While I have the topic bug to go full hard into the anti-theism debate, see, it tricked you there. I will probably shelve that to give the new commentary time to breathe, and instead talk about the grand narrative of the West and why we need to make sure we have control of it, rather than progressives, rather than communists, rather than social justice warriors. And the whole reason why I feel we need to control the grand narrative of the West boils down to one thing, and it is control of culture. One of my key issues of this channel. For me, with the rise of quote-unquote terrorism in 9/11, that was a rise of a grand narrative of the religious right. And when they failed in 2008 to maintain the presidency and maintain, I believe, the Senate seats that they so desperately needed to keep, or no, actually, more loss of the House, I believe it was, the right lost the entire culture. You saw a giant shift towards homosexual marriage, gay marriage, and you saw a giant shift towards trans rights and women's rights, whether existent or not, and the rape culture, and basically the things that marred the social issues aspects of President Barack Obama's career. And why did this happen? Because the shift in narrative. The culture was becoming more progressive. And in doing so, you had all of this stuff come to the mainstream. And yet, bubbling under the surface was the quote-unquote alt-right at the time, which we can now call alt-light, merchant right, whatever you want, as long as it sticks to some kind of narrative definition. Because if you just start creating new terms, you lose people. And in order to control the culture, you need to establish some basic colloquial terms that everybody can get behind and agree on. And for the quote-unquote new right, a lot of it stems on alt-light. Their enemies would call them merchant right because of their grifting tactics. For most of them, I would say. I think people like Paul Joseph Watson have learned their place more or less as far as being a fucking grifter and, co-opting shit and realizing that you can't just jack something from somebody because you think it sounds cool. But at the time, Martina Markota, the original author of the Conservative is the New Counterculture statement, she was correct. And yet, the right did not really capitalize on this properly. And later down the road, I will probably comment on the state of merchant right. Because, to me, I find it incredibly hilarious that so many of these people have turned out to just be opportunists and grifters and people that would take advantage of you for financial gain. And yet, we still have this problem. The far left, who thought were mainstream, have now seized control of the Democratic Party, of the mainstream establishment. They have made corporations bend knee to their ridiculous clown shoes ideology, and yet we have this issue that persists. The narrative is still centered on them. The mainstream media has not rejected these people. Corporations have not rejected these people. Fucking governments and even the establishment left have not rejected these people. In fact, most of the presidential candidates for the 2020 Democratic primary are parroting these people in order to gain sympathy. But these are the people who you should be flat out rejecting or trying to return to some sense of rationality, because these people are not rational. The fucking far left is an irrational force used to bully, silence, and shame people who disagree with them. And if they were to gain power, you could bet your fucking ass that they would act just like the Communist Party that they so love. from, pre or post Rasputin Soviet Russia. Because, all these fucking establishment media people want to bitch about Trump being a Russian agent. It's like, you have people who believe in the same ideology that spawned the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik uprising, in your fucking party, telling you about social issues. Social issues that, by the way, these Bolsheviks would have fucking gassed you over. And yet, here we are, just letting them run amok. As a former leftist, these are the people who drove me away. And through their narrative, I was awakened to realize that we cannot allow these people any inch, any quarter. We must push them back at whatever cost, or we lose, the great American nation. And today I record this on 9/11 as I remember the grand narrative surrounding the religion of Islam, as George Bush, immediately when he heard about xenophobic attacks against Muslims, he literally went on television and said, Islam is the religion of peace. And as the good Naked Ape, who is no longer creating content, once said, Islam is the religion of piss. And, the grand lie of the weapons of mass destruction and the religion of peace should further sully the Bush household as reason to be probably the worst presidency of the modern era. Trump clings to best despite having, just such subpar standards, and it's just so amazing that despite clinging to boomerdom, he just continues to succeed. However, I fear it's, if we lose control of the narrative, if the neocons get control of the narrative, we lose. Trump will fucking become a boomer neocon in his second term, and all will be for naught, and, people will just be, politically homeless in large swaths, which wouldn't be too bad, because maybe we'd wake up from the grand narrative of we only need two political parties in this country to function. However, the greatest narrative, the one that, controls the moral fabric of the nation, the one that says, America is good, America is great, America has lifted people out of poverty, lifted people out of oppression, is just lost. And why? Because progressives control the narrative. Progressives say America is a nation built on slavery and oppression of minorities and women. And yet, no one seems to want to stop them on saying, your narrative is false. Reading that fucking guy's book, A Brief People's History of the United States. I wish I could remember this author. Howard Zinn. That fucking guy is perhaps responsible for the modern world and the modern view of America, just as much as probably someone like Noam Chomsky. And yet, here we are, not doing anything to stop this narrative. And really, us at the bottom cannot do anything. It's if you want to become a content creator, that is one way to start controlling the grand narrative. But the people up top really need to realize that, control the culture, control the grand narrative. And if we don't control the grand narrative of the West, then we open it up to as just fundamentalist Islam. We open it up to progressives. We open it up to communists. And we have to really ask ourselves, as the American people, do we want this? Do we want to just be lied to every day? Do we want our children to go to school and be lied to by their teachers on, where they came from, what their history is? That diversity is a strength. The greatest progressive narrative, I would say, is diversity being our strength. And that is simply because it's such an empty platitude that if you were to say diversity is not a strength, you get called a white gnat, a wig gnat, if you will. And yeah, I had to catch myself there in case of I actually get monetization one day. Oh, fucking sue me. Anywho, with all that being said, the grand narrative of the West is something that rational people should be in control of at all times, be it left, be it right. As long as people adhere to the certain value that America is a good thing for the world, if not just its own existence, and to destroy America as an idea is to destroy freedom, liberty, and individual rights as an idea. And that is because no other country before America was able to do so. So to all you progressives out there who want to take control of the narrative, take control of the way we think, tread lightly, because we are coming to change the world.